Looks like we have a very good turnout today. Very exciting. Very important conversation. DeFi, does it matter on Ethereum or not? It was a large conversation on Twitter a few months ago. Vitalik got in some trouble with the DeFi OGs. And yeah, now we have this at Devcon. So consequences have actions. We have a lot of really cool people here today. So let's just start off. Let's do intros. My name is Namik, part of the founding team here at Megachain, hence the hat. I love crypto, I love DeFi. I don't think DeFi is the only thing that matters, but I love DeFi.
Hi everyone, my name is Loy. I started Kyber, one of the earliest decentralized exchanges in the space. I guess, back then in 2017, DeFi wasn't a thing. Stepped out a couple of years ago, but still help out the team here and there, and recently started Caliber, focus on building new DeFi project, new improvement on Ethereum with new founders.
Hi, my name is Tascha, also a local here from Thailand. Founded a project called Alpha Finance, which built a lot of the DeFi products and a lot of experiments. The flagship product is called Alpha Homora, where we came up with the concept of leverage yield farming. So I can share a bit more of DeFi back in 2020 and also nowadays as well. Transitioned to advisory role last year, and then also started another project called Infinite, which is more on the DeFi infrastructure layer. So it abstracts a lot of complexities to get new DeFi protocols built and scale within the same chain and to different chains as well. Yeah, that's about me.
I'm Kain. I guess I'm partially responsible for us being on the stage here today. The funny thing is, I was on the stage and I was like, the last time I was on a DevCon main stage was accepting a UX award at DevCon 4 in 2018 for Haven, which is dark, right? It speaks to how bad UX was back then. But we won a UX award. So it's been 6 years back on the main stage. Very excited to be here. So thanks.
Let's get straight into it. Ethereum's the first Turing-complete blockchain. Very quickly found PMF as this global financial layer, right? BlackRock is on Ethereum, super bullish. What's the role of DeFi on Ethereum? What's its edge? And how can DeFi and Ethereum maintain this moat? What do you think, Kyber?
I think the best thing that Ethereum can offer to many DeFi applications is that it has the highest security guarantee. It's a non-stop Turing complete machine that you can expect that at really I think since 2016 we had no consensus incident ever, right? So I think you can be sure that your DeFi application will run in extremely even in extremely harsh condition. It won't be stopped because of whatever condition, right? So I think that's the highest guarantee that Ethereum can offer to DeFi protocols.
But do people really care? You're seeing a lot of activity on other L1s. You're seeing Arbitrum as an L2 have, it was the DeFi chain for a long time. I mean, Hyperliquid is also doing pretty well there now. But do people even care about these guarantees? Does anyone here care about the guarantees?
I think they would care if they suffer from, say, LifeNet issues, right? I mean, I think there are several incidents in the past that some of the popular layer one, some of the popular Ethereum killer was stopped, right? Basically for hours, and people cannot close their lending position. People cannot do their transaction, right? And that really made them suffer, right? Financially lost, right?
So firstly, I love Ethereum, right? So I'm just playing a bit of devil's advocate. I think arguments can be made that ETH L1, when gas fees are unbelievably high, it's basically off, right? For every single person in an emerging market, they can't afford to use Ethereum L1 when something important is happening. It's too expensive. What do you think, Tascha?
Yeah, no, I think two things actually. I think the question to really answer the question of why define Ethereum, right? You have to think of what the users want. Users want to use DeFi for yields, for liquidity. The yields a lot of the time on chain comes from interoperability or the money Legos, which I think that's pretty much competitive edge of Ethereum. Also the network effects as well for being around for so long, a lot of builders there. A lot of liquidity there. Therefore, you as a new builder, as a new D app, actually benefits a lot more building on Ethereum because you get that edge. And as a result to that, users therefore get the benefits of network effect of that money Lego. The second, for sure, when we talk about DeFi is liquidity. Ethereum has 60 billion of liquidity out of about like 110 billion of liquidity on chain. That's like more than 50%. So I feel like if you're looking to swap, you're looking to lend or do different things, you don't want to pay like 5% of fees or like whatever high slippage, right? So I feel like at the end of the day, there can be many L1s and L2s. It will take time, and I believe that there will not be just all activities on Ethereum, and I think there will be like multiple players that would capture a lot of demand. But I think it would also take time for the other L1s and L2s to also get the benefit of that network effect and the liquidity. Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Kain?
I think it's trade-offs, right? Like the trade-off that we have with L1 is it doesn't go down. It gets expensive, right? But there is super deep liquidity, and you can find a clearing price for almost everything, right? You've got composability, you've got all of these different markets. There's a ton of Lindy, and yeah, in congestion moments, most people are priced out, but it will still keep functioning. You'll still be able to find liquidity if you're willing to pay for it, right? The flip side is then we have L2s, which are able to keep prices down even during congestion. Different trade-offs, different different value props, right? Like they're not as liquid, they are cheaper most of the time, and so you're not going to get priced out from using Arbitrum or Optimism, right? So I think that the point of Ethereum is to have this very secure L1 and then have many different approaches to scaling for L2s. That's the roadmap. It's working. And I think that that's one of the reasons why people keep building on it.
So we've kind of mentioned L2s a couple times now. And the prompt is like, why DeFi matters on Ethereum. Do we think that L2s are Ethereum?
I think for small transaction, for like simple transaction, you can always go to L2, right? I think a lot, and also like so before that, let me give some sort of like history kind of like lesson from that we learned from Kyber, right? Back in 2018, 2017, when we launched Kyber, basically our model was that we allow market makers to do market making on-chain, right? By making like on-chain transaction to update the price and to allow other people to trade with the market makers. And I think when DeFi summer happens, when DeFi summer happened, it really killed Kyber, right? Why? Because the gas price increased like crazily, and it made it like really impossible for the market makers to update the price and to really like make profit, right? Because like they had like to spend too much on the price update. So I think use cases like that can certainly run on L2 because one is cheap, second is fast, right? Like you can do like high frequency price update. You can do like a lot of like micro transaction, but you cannot do on L1, right? So it really like have users have more option, right? If they want to do like high value transaction, if they want to make sure that they can always withdraw their fund from like a lending vault or like do their like basically they can pay right, like in order to do things, then they can go to L1. L2 they can do things fast, they can do like things cheap, right? And they can do a lot of other new things.
Yeah, I love your answer. I think I feel the same way. If the L1 and the L2 have different kinds of DeFi experiences and applications, they're complementary. If they're a replication of what exists on the L1, I think then you're just competitive and parasitic. What do you guys think of Unichain? Uniswap, right? Like, it exists on every chain. Every L2, every L1. It's an AMM. And now they have their own app chain. Thoughts?
Maybe I won't answer that question. I'll answer a different question that you asked earlier. So my view of whether L2s are Ethereum is that we have found ourselves in this place, right, for reasons. A lot of them are regulatory reasons, I think, where we could have been more pragmatic about how we were building things, but we had to kind of try and psyops everyone into believing that things were further along than they actually were, right? All L2s are somewhat centralized, right? To varying degrees. In a normal world that didn't have adversarial regulators trying to shut down crypto, we would be able to be honest about that set of trade-offs, right? And just say, look, this is technology that we're in the process of building. You have L1. L1 has trade-offs. L2, all of the scaling solutions have trade-offs. And we're going to build demand first. And once we've got that demand, then we're going to figure out ways to decentralize it. There's two problems. One, in the early days, we had a lot of people who were here for ideological reasons, including myself, who were like hard line about decentralization and censorship resistance, right? And I've come to the conclusion after like 7 years of building in this space that that's just not viable. Right? There's no point in building a perfectly decentralized, perfectly censorship-resistant system if there's no demand for it, right? And so we need to be willing to make pragmatic trade-offs as we're building towards, demand, because these are technical problems. We can definitely solve them, right? So my view today is that it's better to build demand and then figure out ways to make the technology better over time, more decentralized, more censorship resistant, than to start with some pure ideal. And I think that we've all been moving in this direction, right? Like all of the L2s did this, but we kind of had to like squint and pretend that it wasn't the case. It's also the case of DeFi. Like all the dApps are not decentralized, right? They're hosted on AWS, they're hosted in Cloudflare, but we're like, oh yeah, like no multi-sigs, don't look over here. It's bullshit, right? And if we weren't in the regulatory environment that we've been in for the last 4 years, I think we would have been able to be more honest about it. And I think that now we need to just lean into it, be pragmatic, build things, get to mass adoption, and once we've got mass adoption, we can figure out how to make it purely decentralized and purely censorship resistant and really improve the tech. So it's a very different approach to how we started back in the old days building OG DeFi, but I think it's the only way forward.
Hyperliquid is a great example, right? Build for users what they want, and that's like, a distributed system in the end of the day where anyone can come and like participate, right? And is it as decentralized as like your conventional L1? Like, no. But does it have an unbelievable PMF? And that's awesome? Yes. So yeah, I think like the trade-offs are definitely part of the Mega thesis for sure. So music to my ears. Anybody else have any thoughts on the L2, L1 stuff, or we can move on?
Actually, I think the other thought that I have is that a lot of people might jeopardize the fact that hey, like more L2s create more liquidity fragmentation. But I think on a hindsight, those new liquidity on these new L2s could not even have been on chain to begin with if there's not for that L2 to begin with, right? So I feel like each L2 kind of have its own community. The founder, the team building that L2 have their own, VCs or have their own community or like on-chain users deploying liquidity there. So I feel like, yes, there's liquidity fragmentation for the short term among all these, tens, hundreds of L1s and L2s, but over time, like I feel like there's going to be a point where that liquidity gets smarter. They will know about Ethereum, know about other L2s, know about other yield opportunities elsewhere, and then eventually that would, kind of aggregate to a few places. So I think we're seeing that shift a bit more as well as those L2s launch a token and the liquidity kind of like, aggregate to somewhere else. So I think net positive overall, in my opinion, for the whole industry.
Yeah, I think like I was always a big fan of Arbitrum as a case study because it showed that the most efficient, they had the shortest block times, right? So for DeFi, it enables more efficient DeFi than anywhere else, and it found really strong PMF. OP with the superchain is trying to create like this next level of interoperability between like their cluster. Really, really exciting. I tend to believe that like too much fragmentation is an issue, especially when you don't have differentiated block space, right? If it's just like all horizontal scaling, but you don't actually, you can increase like the capacity, the total net amount of block space that is associated with the Ethereum ecosystem. But if you don't actually work on like vertical scaling as well, like you're just capped, right? And like, okay, if we just want the grand success of like Ethereum to be like, you know, transfer of like money, right? Okay, it works. But if we want like these really sophisticated applications, which exist in like other high-perf execution environments like Solana, we need to work on like multiple degrees. But you know, you've mentioned like L1s a couple of times, right? I'd love to get into this conversation of like to understand why does DeFi matter on Ethereum. We need to understand how DeFi is different on Ethereum compared to other alt L1s, right? As we know, like Ethereum is the most decentralized smart contract Turing complete blockchain, right? And that it attracts large players, right? I remember I was once speaking to a famous Solana VC, and we were talking about like the role of DeFi on ETH versus the role of DeFi on Sol, and he was like, okay, you know, 10 years down the road when there's like a bank-to-bank transfer of like a currency, right? That happens on ETH. That's not going to happen on Sol. If someone's moving $500 million, that happens on Ethereum. But we'd love to get everyone else's opinions here on like, what is the granularity of DeFi on Ethereum compared to other, you know, like it's not like Solana is like super centralized. It's still relatively decentralized, right? How does DeFi differ between like, let's say Ethereum, Solana, and yeah, I think those are like the main two L1s out there today, in my opinion.
I think just, you know, it shows a lot from the stats as well, right? Like Ethereum, as mentioned, like 60 billion, I think about like 400,000 wallets. So that shows a lot of like how aggregated or like how large a wallet has to be on Ethereum just to make sense on Ethereum versus Solana, where about 7 billion of assets and 6 million of wallets. So I think it shows the type of applications on those two different L1s already, and also the types of activities and the types of users. And those results are pretty much, you know, as a result of the tech or like, you know, how it's built as well. You mentioned that, you know, Ethereum's a lot more decentralized, a lot more secure, and hence, you know, high liquidity or like large amount of liquidity is more trustworthy on Ethereum as opposed to Solana, where I think it's more very much like retail driven. They may not care so much about decentralization or, you know, security for maybe like $100 of wallet, right? But they're willing to like do a lot of like bets and a lot of like derivatives trading on Solana and make, you know, a lot of money from doing that activity. So I think there's no right or wrong in my opinion of like whether it's decentralized or not, but just more of like what's the unique differentiation of that chain or that L2 it is, and how that differentiation would attract that differentiated types of applications and therefore that segment of users. Because if there's no differentiation from the tech or the fundamental chain itself, then it's going to be very, very hard to attract the right apps and the right users.
I think that there was a moment in time where a lot of the ideological builders were on Ethereum, and the more pragmatic builders were pushed to Solana, partially because, you know, cheaper transaction fees, right? They were like, we don't really care about anything other than users being able to transact cheaply, right? And, you know, they went there, and ultimately DeFi is about network effects, right? You know, the network effects on Ethereum mainnet are really powerful. And there was a period in time where we were needing to bootstrap new network effects on all the L2s, which was really hard, right? Like, I tried to do this on Optimism. It did not go well. It was a very difficult thing, right? And in parallel to that, you had network effects that were growing on Solana. And so you now have these two independent, networks that have different network effects with different builders, and I think they both have enough critical mass to be sustainable. What's interesting about Ethereum to me, though, is we now have this new kind of process where we get to experiment with things like Mega ETH with some of these new networks that are trying different sets of trade-offs, and we get to try and bootstrap new network effects and see whether or not we can compete with, ultra low fees, for example, right? Or, really low latency. And so even though each time we create a new set of trade-offs with a new L2, we need to bootstrap network effects, there is already that kind of core liquidity that's sitting on L1 that's sort of anchoring it all. So you don't start from scratch, right? Like you wouldn't want Mega to be an L1. That would be a really hard process to bootstrap, but it's able to kind of pull some of the ETH liquidity there. So I think that we have a very interesting prospect in front of us where something like Solana, which is monolithic and has network effects, is now going to have a bunch of things that are competing with it on some of its core value props, right? Low transaction fees, high throughput, et cetera. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see whether it kind of gets squeezed in the middle, right? From like deep liquidity from L1 and then super fast, low, transaction fees from some of the L2s. So I think this cycle we'll find out.
I think one of the things that I always look at into new Ethereum coolers or like new layer ones is whether with the new technology improvement they can create any new use cases, right? And if you look into DeFi, I think all the DeFi innovation still happen on Ethereum or EVM kind of ecosystem, right? Like we have concentrated liquidity, perp DEX, AMM DEX, whatever, right? Like, DeFi lendings. Every innovation that we have seen in DeFi started in the Ethereum ecosystem. Solana or other high-performance layer one, they might have amplified them, right, the use cases, but still, I mean, they all started like from the same innovation that started in the Ethereum ecosystem, right?
I would say like the central limit order book came from Solana. No one ever tried to do that in Ethereum because like, come on, like that's a bit silly.
There was Ether Delta back in 2017, but like I think the gas was just like too bad.
We did try it. It just failed horribly. Yeah.
So I think like when we started this conversation by talking about like ETH L1, right? And we spoke a bit about ETH L2, and we had a conversation around how if you have an L1 and an L2, like if they're complementary, meaning they go after different kinds of use cases, like that's pretty chill. If not, that's not so chill. But one of the edges of ETH L1 is the fact that it's like this extremely decentralized, extremely you can do all these awesome things on ETH L1, but there's not that many things you can do, right? So yesterday or the day before this, Justin Drake had like an announcement around like a bunch of optimizations for ETH L1. What did you guys think of that conversation? It was actually in this stage at 5 p.m., same time.
So, I came here to watch that, which is the first time that I've like run across like a Devcon to try and get to a presentation. And I think that there were a lot of things that were very exciting about that. My issue with it fundamentally, and there's definitely different takes on this, is that if you're going to like YOLO propose a different path for Ethereum L1, then it needs to probably have a different time frame, right? So we already have a long-term roadmap for L1. If you want to propose something that is supposed to be a radical deviation from that, having the same time frame, I think, is not the right approach. And so I think that there was a little bit of disappointment, including for me. I was like, 2030 is like so far away, right? Like we're talking, and then also it's software, right? Like I was sitting there when Vitalik was like, the merge is coming in 2017, like. No, like, so, 2030 also feels like much further away because it's really 2035. So I think that if we're going to propose radical approaches to L1 scaling, then it needs to be, something that is much more pragmatic and sooner.
Yeah, I was excited. I also sprinted to get here. I was literally sitting on the floor in that corner, and yeah, it was a bit disheartening for me because in a lot of ways, like I knew basically what the spiel was going to be, and it's actually very bullish even for MEGETH because we're not interested in replicating any use case that can exist on any L1. So I want Ethereum L1 to be better, right? I don't think of it as competitive whatsoever, but it really does show just like the level of ossification of Ethereum as a mainnet, right? It's very, very large. It's very difficult to get things across the finish line to the point where we have like over a year for just like pilling people, right? When, you know, it's like clearly we are in two different rooms because I feel like people already are like, we need to do something.
We've legit become Bitcoin. Like there was a period of time where we were like, Bitcoin, they're crazy, like they won't do anything. And we're like, all right, let's think about it for 2 years and then we'll start. Like, it's like, I don't know. I mean, yes, of course, Ethereum is important. We shouldn't fuck it up. But like, you know, it doesn't feel like that's a reasonable time frame.
What do you guys think?
I feel like Justin Drake, he high up the talk a little bit too much. And I think that people have like different expectation from what was delivered. But I think like from the protocol developer point of view, right? I think the most exciting things that or potential that I got out from that is one, you know, user experience on L1 might be a lot better given, you know, the potential shorter block time, faster finality time, right? But the reality is that I think protocol developers will just like, you know, I think will probably like accommodate or like change accordingly to the updates from the layer 1, right? So like, for example, currently 12-second block time, maybe it's not too bad for users. It's just a little bit like, you know, too much of MEV and stuff, right? But, you know, if users want to have better experience, they go to layer 2, right? 4-second block time, less MEV, price is closer to the centralized changes price. But, you know, I think it doesn't change much like to like protocol developers that much. It might impact a lot more on the user experience. It might, you know, have like more transaction on Ethereum layer 1. But I think from the protocols developers point of view, not much changes.
Yeah, I think a lot of thoughts very much resonate with both two other panelists as well. I think the first thought is like, you know, from 12-second block time to 4-second sounds good, but, you know, by 2030, will that be even too slow? You know, you also mentioned perhaps in 2035, right? 10 years from now, maybe like all the things we're talking about is all like already abstract away from the users and everything's expecting like in less than a second, right? So that's the first thought. The second as well is more like, I think it really raises a question of whether Ethereum has to be fast or whether Ethereum will like should play the role of, you know, the main settlement layer, don't have to be as fast, let the other L2s do the fast job, and just be secure, be decentralized, and maintain that role. So I think, you know, really still debating among myself whether, you know, Ethereum should or should not take this route. And I think it's, you know, there's no right or wrong answer as well. But I think whether we take on this route or not, it will really change and shift the way ETH token as well will play, and also the Ethereum network will play in the whole dynamic.
Yeah, I feel like the need for Ethereum L1 to do these optimizations comes from the fact that like L2s are kind of parasitic, right? Or at least, in my opinion, they have been historically. Yeah, like look at like, I don't know. Yeah, like look at Hyperliquid, right? Vampire attacks Arbitrum and is now its own L1 and is amazing. But what happened, right? Like it was able to get a lot of liquidity and user base from Ethereum. What was good for the Ether asset? Nothing much. What was good for the Ether user on L1? Nothing much. And then, you know, a lot of question marks can be even pointed to existing L2s. Like if your architecture effectively can easily become its own L1, right? Like, are you building this L2 because you want to just like vampire attack Ethereum's existing ecosystem? And then, you know, strong arguments can be made for like, we have to focus on the ETH L1 because these L2s are not actually good for us. Yeah. What do you guys think we need to do to 100x DeFi on Ethereum? And that can be in L2s as well. Ethereum is what you want it to be.
I think there, you know, one of the mistakes that I certainly made back in the day was rejecting Polygon, right? I was like, it's a side chain, it's, ideology again, right? It's a side chain, it's not real, it's parasitic to L1, all kinds of stuff, right? I think that there is a need to ensure that Ethereum, including the L2s, sidechains, whatever, maintains relevance. If Ethereum loses relevance, it's very hard to get it back, right? Ethereum is the dominant platform for DeFi today. It has the deepest liquidity, but if something flips it, it could get dark, right? And so I think that improving the L1 is important. If we just kind of hand over all responsibility for relevance to L2s, then you're right. Like if one L2 becomes huge and then it decides to split off to an L1, like good night, right? So I think that there is a really important aspect to maintaining relevance for the L1, continuing to improve it. And I think the existing roadmap is good, right? I think the existing roadmap is a solid roadmap. It's good to see alternatives proposed. I think that some of those alternatives, I was hoping it was going to be like magical wizardry and like next Tuesday we get, 1 second block times or something, but here we are. I genuinely believe that we need both of these things because to your point, if we just, kind of let the L1 ossify and turn into Bitcoin, where it's like a 5-year debate about OpCat, like that's a really, really bad place to be. And I think that it's almost definite that Ethereum will lose relevance at that point.
I also feel like Bitcoin can afford to take 5 years. Those affordances do not exist for Ethereum, right? Like if you were number one, you can do this, but not if you're number two.
Also, like no one is pretending to build a new network. I mean, Litecoin gave up on that, right? Like, there's not even digital silver. I think it's like now a sloth chain or something as of today, right? So, there's no credible threat to Bitcoin from that perspective of, store value, digital gold, whatever it is. But there are many, many, many credible threats to Ethereum, including the L2s, arguably, right? So, there is a responsibility to continue to improve the L1 in order to make sure that, it has a defensible moat.
What do you guys think? How do we make DeFi 100x better on Ethereum?
In 2018, 2019, when before DeFi summer, right? So I think one of the things that we did really, and I think we're still proud of that now, is we started WBTC, right, with BitGo and a couple of other projects. So back then, when we realized that, okay, the TV or the asset on Ethereum, that there weren't that too many assets for people to trade, right? For like DeFi, like if you do DeFi and the whole like TVL of everything is like 100 millions, right, US dollars. What else can you do? So we did WBTC, and I think recently we started like seeing more and more people like bringing other assets to Ethereum, right, via like real world asset or in different ways as well. I think that, and also like if you look into like stable coin, right, like USDC and USDT, I think most of it is on Ethereum now. I think that's one way for us to secure like the number one position for Ethereum, right? Like we need to bring more asset in. We need like to bring like a decentralized version of BTC into Ethereum, for example, or like we need to unlock Bitcoin liquidity in Ethereum and Ethereum layer 2s.
I mean, the counterpoint to that though is like Tron and USDT, right? Like this crazy scam chain, and it's doing huge volumes of stablecoins, right? There's reasonable concerns about both of those things, USDT and Tron, right? But from a practical standpoint, there's a lot of shit happening on Tron and a lot of people are using it. And even the argument of like, oh yeah, high value transfers, people will only do it on Ethereum. Like people do big USDT transfers on Tron all the time.
Yeah, actually in Turkey, you go to the Grand Bazaar and you go to the OTC desks, they don't do Ethereum, they only do Tron because they know what it is. It's actually kind of sad, but it's true. They only use Tron.
I mean, I think most people, I think, as we talked earlier, right? I mean, L1 Ethereum will fit for some certain use cases, right? Like for the assets that are less volatile, that like that you don't need like to require like sub-second kind of like finality, then you can still rely on layer one, right? Hopefully, in a couple of years or in a few years from now, on the next Devcon, people will start like using USDT or USDC payment on Megachain, on Base, on all the layer tools, right?
Awesome. So let's move to questions. We have 9 minutes and 30 seconds allocated for Q&A. If you guys don't have questions, I'm just going to keep LARPing. So, question for me. Oh, geez. From my point of view, I see Megachain as a direct competitor to Solana. Let's fucking go. Assuming tech performs as promised, inshallah, how do you feel about this comparison, and also when testnet? Yeah, I mean, I think that like there's a meme that is said sometimes where we're going to out Solana. I think like fundamentally the thesis for Megachain is performance and decentralization don't really go hand in hand, and that's because consensus is complicated. The more decentralized you are, right, like it takes longer to reach consensus. And on Megachain, what we say is, okay, you know what, like it is tough, let's just kick that down to Ethereum. The power of proofs, be that fraud proofs or validity proofs, coupled with the forced exit / forced inclusion, meaning even if the sequencer is wilding out, I can go back to the L1, is unbelievably powerful. People haven't explored it enough. And when you take these guarantees and you say, you know what, now let's go performance first, you're able to achieve a level of performance that's never really been seen before in crypto. And that's what like our thesis is, and that's what we're doing. And yeah, testnet very soon. Keep tuned. All I'll say is like, yeah, really excited, to be completely honest. With Uniswap V4 coming up probably early next year, do you think DeFi will get even crazier? With hooks, will we possibly see the stocks going to DeFi of AMM? You seem like you have some facial reactions.
I mean, obviously, I think with V4 coming, I think we will see like a lot more like different strategy that people will bring in, like with AMM and different like strategy that every hook will have their own way of market making, right? But I think the reality that we are seeing now, because like I think Kyber now runs one of the biggest DEX aggregator on EVM, and we see that I think a lot more liquidities are going off-chain, right? Via like private market makers, via RFQ network, and they have like every one of them will have a different strategy of like where to get liquidity, how to do pricing and things like that. Of course, they still use like on-chain for settlement, right? But I think we're seeing more and more of that like going off-chain, and I think doing stock, I think like you don't need like Uni V4 to do that, right? Like like all the RFQ, all the like existing infrastructure can already do that. I'm also like super excited to see like what Uni V4 can bring to the table. There's been like a lot of talk lately, but like I haven't seen like concrete example. Yeah.
I mean, every single new version of Uniswap manages to break DeFi in some spectacular way, right? So I'm looking forward to the unintended consequences of V4. I can only imagine what chaos is going to come from this.
But I feel like a lot of the hooks or pretty much strategies that you can do are only a number of them. Like you can do a lot with hooks for sure with Uniswap, but I feel like the only ones that are gonna get adopted would be like a handful. And I think a lot of those yield strategies or trading strategies or so-called hooks are already like being used and built by these, whether it's market makers doing on-chain things, instead of building it off-chain in themselves and just making it more on-chain and accessible for normal users to access those hooks. So I think yeah, the impact would be more on like a lot of people would be able to access what those use strategies that market makers are already doing, and not just limited by the ones that they build themselves.
Kain, how will Infinex change the DeFi landscape?
Good question. I thought that my meme coin was going to maybe win that question battle there for a second, but looks like no. So sorry.
What about meme coin?
Oh, I launched a meme coin as a way of like testing out Solana. I wanted to like get my head around what Solana was doing. So I launched this meme coin and airdropped it to all the SNX holders, and they're just like the biggest jeets in history, and they all just like dumped it to oblivion. And they were like, I can't believe that you've done this to us. Like, you know, they're fighting with each other, and they're like, what are you gonna do? Like to, you know, I was like, guys, like just don't dump on each other, right? Like your friends aren't your exit liquidity, but here we are. Anyway, Infinex.
Wait, really quick question.
Yeah.
So it was a Sol meme coin to SNX holders, right? But SNX was on Ethereum, so it was a different wallet address. What was that like?
Yeah, so basically what I did is I airdropped a token on Base called 2192, and then they were all just like dumping it into oblivion. So I was like, all right, like we have to burn it. So I made everyone burn the token, so they had to like all burn it to get something. And what I gave them was a Solana token, and then they were obviously all pissed about that. And so, you know, it was this long, like, weird, you know, airdrop game, basically. But yeah, it turned out poorly, and everyone's mad. So classic meme coin games. So Infinex, though, Infinex is trying to bring Binance on chain, right? We've had for the last, you know, decade, basically, a little bit longer, centralized exchanges dominating transactions, right? Most crypto transactions happen inside of someone's database. And we've made inroads against this at various times. You know, Uniswap's competed with Coinbase on a couple of days in history, so, you know, good job. But we haven't really been able to make much headway against centralized exchanges. So we finally now, I think, have the infrastructure that we need to be able to bring everyone on chain. But the way to do that, you know, as I kind of alluded to earlier, is to be pragmatic, right? Building DeFi, we tried to build DeFi in a way that was both non-custodial and censorship resistant, and we didn't even land the censorship resistance, but we just created the worst UX. And so Infinex is basically saying, look, we're going to park we're going to be non-custodial, right? But we're going to park censorship resistance, and we're going to build the best UX possible, and we're going to get people using all of these on-chain protocols that we've made, and we're going to create, you know, mass adoption. And once we've got mass adoption, then we'll go back and fix the you know, the other issues.
So next up is, what do you think of the value accrual mechanisms for L2s versus the monetary premium of ETH? I'll start as someone who's building an L2. I think like most L2 tokens kind of suck. I think in general, like governance is a bit of a meme. We've seen this with like major DeFi protocols that are like governance tokens, and then the governance happens, and then they don't follow governance. So yeah, I think like part of this is because the regulatory landscape has been very scary. So when you look at like tokenomic design, the design space is very limited. I do think that is changing, and I think there'll be like a renaissance for token design over the next few years, and we'll be able to catch up on lost time. And I'm excited to see what that looks like in the future. But at the moment, I definitely think like L2s are like, you know, L2 tokens are kind of cursed, and the sad part is they don't even provide value back to the ETH asset class. So it's like a lose-lose, and no one's really that interested, at least in my opinion. What do you guys think?
I think the best L2 token design that I've seen recently was Unichain, because they actually have, you know, the ability to capture the value from MEV, from like all the different fees that Uni has been, or any like, you know, DEX has been capturing. And I think people were joking around that, you know, Unichain was a fee switch for Uni token that people have been waiting for. Yeah.
Good to see you're still holding your Uni airdrop.
Yeah, I agree. I think a good analogy though is like, if L2 tokens only relying on, you know, transaction fees, capturing all those, then as a result, you need to maximize number of users, which again comes back to how many users are there on chain, right? So I think ultimately we have to kind of like really embed the tokenomics of L2, especially for our L2 as well, to really be a part of the product and the chain and be more creative. Like, what else can you engineer and what else can you capture value along all the different parts of the chain itself? And I think, Barry chain is one idea or like one experimental way of like how you can expand the number of ways to capture that values, but definitely like, not limiting to just that.
I haven't given this much thought, so this could be utterly insane, but I feel like L2 tokens were a mistake. They've created this environment. I mean, that part I have thought about, and that is true. I do believe that. They have created this fragmentation of attention within the Ethereum ecosystem, which is really problematic. Now, okay, you want to launch an L2, it needs a token, like what do you do? I feel like we should have tried something like, if you make the best L2, you get some ETH or something like that, right? Instead of like, just mint your own token out of thin air. I think that would have been a much more effective mechanism for distributing value. Like if you can scale Ethereum, if the EF had been like, all right, we're going to put up, 100 million extra ETH, right? We're going to like increase the inflation rate or something, and whoever captures the most transactions or whatever in L2s, you get this pile of ETH. I think we'd be in a much better place today.
Yeah, I think we just need a closer relationship between the asset and Ether, right? Like the architecture of these L2s should be beneficial both to Ether as an L1, Ethereum as an L1, and Ether as an asset class, and no one's really done it.
Vitalik should buy back all the L2s and ban L2 tokens.
No comment. So when are you going to fight David Hoffman again?
I wanted a rematch and he won't fight me again, which I get. I'm still so injured. I've still got like 3 broken ribs and my fingers are all messed up. So I can understand why he doesn't want to do it again. But also like, come on, David, like give me my rematch, please.
And you had the broken ribs before you even had your fight with David, so you were kind of
they were broken before, unfortunately. I didn't realize. I thought they were bruised, but yeah.
So what is DeFi Learnitas? And like, what's your vision for it?
No, that's the meme coin. That's 2192.
Oh,
they haven't given up on it. Like, guys, let it go. It's over.
Yeah, I was thinking I'm really like not cool. I have no idea what this thing is. So yeah, I guess do you want to talk about synthetics?
Yeah, I can talk about synthetics. Synthetics got to a point last year where I think we tried several different times to find ways to coordinate it. Right, a lot of the OG DAOs struggle with this kind of power vacuum issue. Right, I've talked to Rune about this a little bit. I joked with him. He didn't think it was funny. I said we should stop creating power vacuums, and maybe that would make the governance problems go away. But we've been trying to work out how to inject some agency back into the DAO. Luckily, one of the OG holders stepped up about 6 months ago and said, okay, I'm happy to kind of take on this role, try and coordinate people, try and drive it forward, and rethink how the token mechanism is made. And, I think the interesting thing about building in DeFi is we're still very early. Like we still haven't figured it out, right? Like just because the thing's been around for 6 years doesn't mean that it's working, right? Or doesn't, there's aspects that are working, but there's always optimizations that could be made. And if you don't have someone with agency to kind of do some YOLO things and try things, then you will just kind of stagnate. Right, and so I think within the SNX community, there's a lot of demand for like finding and trying some new things. It's been a while since we've tried anything new, tried something different, tried something a bit aggressive, and so I'm really excited because I think there's this kind of new push. We've launched our own chain, so more L2s, but there's also a push to redesign the token, bring it to this new L2, and find new ways to kind of capture value into the token and drive adoption again. And the final thing that I'll say is like one of the mistakes that DeFi made a few years ago, and I contributed to this, was trying to meme into existence this real yield narrative, right? It's just the, I mean, it's the dumbest, most boring narrative you could possibly have, and I think everyone like fell asleep and stopped caring about DeFi. We need to bring back the fun a little bit. Stanley was saying he's going to launch something with 10,000% APY, so I'm looking forward to that. Maybe he announced it before on his talk, but we need to inject some excitement back in, right? We need to make DeFi fun again. It's not TradFi. It's still early.
If it's not I don't want it. So how can DeFi amplify adoption overall versus deploying on new L2s, new chains, so much tech that building up with that? Does anyone understand what this means?
Yeah, I think it's more of like, how can we have more types of DeFi as opposed to the same type of DeFi applications on just building more L2s? I think comes down to the types of assets, right? So like DeFi applications, it's like a product. So a product for what assets, right? If it's for ETH or let's say governance token, there can only be a certain thing you can do with it. But now that we have more, let's say, types of assets like LST, LRT, different kinds of RWA, then each type of asset will require or like will expand the innovative area of like what you can do with it. So I think with the rise of new assets already being on chain, it already gives rise to more types of DeFi products already. So I think to amplify that even more, then we need more types of assets on chain, and that would consistently lead to more types of products building around those assets.
I think people need to understand like where to do what, right? Like. I think the issue of having like 50,000 new L2s and new chains, which are all the same, is there's actually like nothing new, right? It might be an asset which kind of looks like this other asset which exists on that other chain, and like there's some variation of the same DEX, but like it's a tiny bit different. Doesn't really matter. It's not a new experience. So I think like part of it is study what Solana's like execution environment enabled, and that enabled a new kind of DeFi, and ultimately, shilling Mega ETH, I guess. But like, I think until you have like an execution environment which facilitates new kinds of activity, maybe we should stop just like replicating the same thing and not fragment users and just like focus on DeFi on the L1. Like, there's DeFi, like ETH L1 is kind of cheap now because like no one's using it.
It's not as cheap when you're subsidizing people's gas, trust me. It feels more expensive.
What do you guys, do you have any thoughts, Loy?
I think eventually, like, I think there are a few things that will help like user life better, right? One is on the wallet stack. I think wallets should abstract away like all the different chain for users. And secondly, on the aggregator stack, that will basically, like, users don't need to know that they're trading on like Uniswap or Curve or like whatever DEX, right? They just need like to call the API and that's it, and everything will be done for them. They will get the best rate. They get like the best execution ever, right? I think these two things will matter a lot for DeFi in general. That users don't need to care which chain they are on, which DEX, which protocol that they're interacting with, and just a couple of clicks, they are done.
What do you think about like restaking DeFi?
It creates a lot of new asset, and that's good for DeFi. So there are more like activities, more asset for people to consider. Yeah, I think in general it's good. Whether they are useful, no comment.
I still don't know what restaking is, and at this point I'm
Relatable.
too afraid to ask.
Final words, everyone, go.
On restaking?
No, just like any funny little comment to say goodbye to our beautiful audience.
I think we have all been building so much infrastructure, so much applications. We need to do more, onboarding users. He's doing it. We should all, do more of it. And yeah, I think that would be net positive for even infra builders as well.
We have 4 years to get to mass adoption, and we can basically do whatever the fuck we want. So start doing some crazy shit.
It's time to build, yeah.
Make Ethereum great again. Let's go.